Good morning, Year 5. I hope you had a lovely weekend. We are back with another week. We are sticking with the Umbrella Mouse. We are on to chapter 13, which is called The Hollow. The eagle and the pigeon snapped the umbrella in their talons and burst upwards above the treetops. Leaping on Pip and Hans, the other animals tied their paws tightly behind their backs with twine. The rabbits took positions either side of them, the cat following them from behind, her tail swishing from side to side. Hans gave Pip a look that silently told her not to be afraid, but his eyes were wide with unease, and she felt the string of tears in her own. The rabbits pulled black hoods over their heads, and the world before them disappeared. Shoved forward, Pip walked blindly on, hearing muffled yells of protest from Hans beside her. For what seemed like hours, Pip felt the crunch of dead leaves under her paws until the air grew thick with a woody smell. She was pushed through a wall of twigs that scratched against her fur, and her ears pricked, hearing the familiar sound of Morse code. "What is this?" a female voice said, bristling with alarm, and the dits and dars stopped at once. "Who are they?" "Germans," one of the rabbits said, ripping off Pip and Hans's hoods. "The sheepdog sounded the alarm, and we found them at the edge of the forest." Pip blinked. They were inside a large hollow underneath a fallen oak tree. Its thick leafy boughs created an oval chamber, and the morning light dappled the crisp ground with a rippling white honeycomb. A bullfinch crouched in a large nest concealed in the upper branches, wearing the same headphones and holding the same triggers Pip had seen in Bernard Booth's hideout in London. Directly beneath them stood a hedgehog, with little brown eyes that creased at the sides with wisdom. She was surrounded by a small crowd of wild rabbits, squirrels, rats, field mice, 3 beavers, and a stag, dipping his grand head of antlers to the ground to peer inside the hollow. The cat sat on her haunches beside them and purred. "We saw them come down from the sky," the other rabbit said. "In that." He pointed his paw to the umbrella clutched in the eagle and white pigeon's talons, as they dropped it into the hideout from above. The birds placed the umbrella on the ground and stood to attention. Gazing at it with shock and confusion, the hedgehog scowled. "Who are you?" she said, all her prickles standing on end. "Who are you working for?" "Madame," Hans said, drawing a deep breath, his voice tinged with annoyance. "We are on the same side." "I'll be the judge of that," the hedgehog snapped. "Who are you working for?" "Bernard Booth." "Bernard Booth?" she scoffed. "He would never send me a rat and a mouse kitten with an umbrella without warning." "G.I. Joe, the messenger pigeon," Hans said, furrowing his brow. "He was meant to tell you we were coming. He was travelling ahead of us." "G.I. Joe?" the white pigeon cooed in a soft American accent, and her head cocked inquisitively from side to side. "Did you say G.I. Joe?" "There's been no sign of him," the eagle said, and frowned suspiciously, glancing at the white pigeon beside him. "Nazi falcons are trained to kill messenger pigeons. Almost none survive these days. Bernard Booth knows that better than anyone. He wouldn't risk sending his fastest pigeon when he could send a message via Morse code." He turned to the hedgehog and spoke in hushed tones. "Don't trust them, madame. Spies are everywhere. The enemy are trying to infiltrate us. This is a sensitive time. Many are still in hiding after D-Day, and the Allied advance still rests in the balance." Okay, all the animals gathered. The forest animals murmured anxiously, and Pip racked her brains for a way to help. Everything Hans said they didn't accept. She knew he was German, but he was a member of Churchill's secret animal army, and Dickon, G.I. Joe, and Bernard Booth trusted him completely. He had a strong spirit and a tender heart, and she had to do something to help him. "John has a long moustache," she cried, remembering the message in the scroll she had stolen from G.I. Joe. An astonished gasp echoed in the hollow. "What did you say?" the hedgehog asked, turning to Pip with bristling prickles. "I said John has a long moustache," Pip repeated at the top of her voice, trying to sound as confident as possible, but she still had no idea what the words meant. "C'est terrible," a rabbit said under his breath, and his hind leg instinctively thumped the earth with worry. "How do they know the code?" The other animals in the hollow looked at one another in alarm. "Enemy spies," they muttered. "No!" Pip squeaked, but none of the animals were listening to her. "They've intercepted the message from G.I. Joe. They're here to sabotage the plan. There's only one way to deal with enemy spies," the eagle squawked with furious gleaming eyes. "Take them to the interrogation wall." The forest animals cheered. Pouncing on Pip and Hans, they roughly dragged them to the depths of the hollow, where the trunk of the fallen tree had been gnawed into a jagged, semicircular cavity. Shoved against it, Pip shuddered at the torn tufts of fur and feathers snagged on the splinters of wood. "Wait! You don't understand!" Hans protested, struggling like Pip in his bonds, but it was hopeless. The gang of animals were too many and too strong. "Listen to me," he cried, cornered against the wall. "We are here to help you." "Stop!" Pip cried, searching for a way to escape, but the animals surged forward, baring their teeth and claws. "We are on your side." "Nothing you can say can save you now," the cat hissed, curling her lips around her pointed fangs. Pip glared into her savage, dilated eyes, trying to ignore the fear trembling under her fur. "Back off, you stinking hairball," Pip spat, ignoring the cat's tail swishing from side to side. A long, low growl sounded from inside the cat's throat. "We haven't done anything wrong." The eagle leaped towards her, furiously beating his wings. Cowering in alarm, Pip scrunched up her eyes as her ears and whiskers blew out about her face. "Leave her alone," Hans cried. "What if I told you that I was once a Nazi? A Goliath rat?" The forest animals snapped their attention away from the little mouse at once and roared with anger. Hans's words stuck Pip like a blow to the heart. "I didn't know what I was getting into," he said, turning to her before facing the snarling mob. "I hate the enemy, and I can tell you why. When you hear what I have to say, you will see that we are not a threat to you." "Stop," the hedgehog said, her brown eyes blazing with authority. "If we don't listen to their defence, then we are no better than those we hate." The gang of animals loosened their grips and begrudgingly backed away from the prisoners. "Speak then, rat," she said calmly. "But I warn you, if you lie, I will have no control over what happens to you." "If you don't believe me," Hans said, breathing heavily with distress, "then you can gladly kill us both." Okay, let's go on. Sorry, the camera keeps slipping today, doesn't it? Right, we're on to chapter 14, called Hans Disipper Ebsy. "Not so long ago," Hans said, ignoring the other animals and speaking to Pip, her eyes stinging with betrayal. "I lived under the roots of a tree by Lake Ebsy, a place in Bavaria where the water is so clear it mirrors the sky and the snow-topped mountains behind. That was until one winter brought ice so hard it turned the lake to stone. Soon, no birds sang in the treetops, no deer roamed through the forest, and no creatures foraged on the ground. We starved. I buried every member of my family, and I was orphaned and alone, facing the starvation that had killed them all. With what strength I had left, I walked east to find help, but the path was harder than I had ever imagined. The wind bit through my bones, it gouged at my eyes with 1,000 claws, and every step was a peak I was not strong enough to climb. I can't tell you how far I walked before I collapsed in the snow, and my exhausted journey drew to a hopeless end. 2 days later, I woke up in a sewer beneath the town of Grenier, beside a rat as big as a small dog, with auburn fur like mine, but as strong as 3 rats from my clan. His ruby-red eyes sent a shiver down my spine. His name was Herr General, and he had rescued me from the snow. The General nursed me back to health, all the while telling me of Germany's suffering, convincing me that we needed to help the humans find freedom and glory. Youth, loneliness, and grief are the meat evil feeds on, and when I recovered my strength, I followed him to battle for the fatherland, joining his army of Goliath rats. I felt I understood honour, justice, and brotherhood, but I soon learned what it really meant. Hans continued after a long sigh, gravely looking into the distance as if he had stepped into the past. We stowed away inside vans, carrying supplies north to a human concentration camp. Herr General sent us to prey on the innocent people inside, biting them and spreading fleas to infect them with disease. I'm still haunted by the cruelty I saw them inflict, and I quickly realised I had to do something. I ran away, hiding inside pipes and gutters, only reappearing to bite Hitler's guards, doctors and officers instead. I made their lives as difficult as I could, chewing through the brake cables in their cars and motorbikes and through the wires of their radios and telephone lines. One night, when I was taking potato peelings I had stolen from the camp kitchen to give the inmates inside their barracks, I found Herr General and 2 more Goliath rats attacking a woman, too weak to move from where she lay. A deadly fury stirred in my heart, and a bitter fight broke out. The Goliath rats began hunting me, but I escaped, stowing away in a Nazi officer's truck, travelling across the German border into France. Soon after, I sneaked onto a British Lysander plane, collecting members of the French resistance to take to London. I have served Churchill's secret army ever since. A strong sea breeze blustered through the forest trees, and as Hans paused, his eyes blazed under the scars with the memories of his past. Surrounding him and Pip in the hollow under the fallen tree, the forest animals stood, captivated by his story. Enough! The eagle squawked, furiously flicking his gold eyes from one animal to the next. I cannot listen to another word. He is manipulating us. He admits it. He is a Goliath rat. He'll lead them all to us. Leave him alone, Pip squeaked, annoyed by the forest animals nervously murmuring to one another. He's telling the truth. Little wretch, the eagle called, limping towards her. Get away from her, Hans cried, shielding Pip's little body with his own. Axis rat. The eagle darted for him with his sharp, hooked beak glinting in the dappled sunlight. He was a whisker's breadth from Hans when a sudden clattering sounded, followed by a torpedo of grey feathers bursting headlong into the eagle, somersaulting him away from the interrogation wall. G.I. Joe! The white pigeon cooed, rushing to her mate, lying dazed on top of the stunned eagle and smothering him with kisses. It's so good to see you again. Hey, baby, he cooed in return, his velvety American voice cracking with pain. How you doing, Jitterbug? We are very happy to see you again, mon ami, the hedgehog said, hurrying to him and helping him to stand. Dumbfounded, the eagle peeled himself from the earth alone and stared at G.I. Joe. We feared the enemy falcons were too many to outrun after D-Day. You're not wrong, Madame Fassade. I barely made it past those dodos myself. He glanced at Hans and Pip pushed against the interrogation wall and smirked. I'm glad you made it here in one piece, buddy. I see you've made a good first impression. Do you know this rat? The hedgehog said urgently. Sure I do. I've known this hairball since he first joined Churchill's secret animal army. He's on our side, and so's the little lady. Release them at once, Madame Fassade said, her stern brown eyes flashing impatiently from left to right. The forest animals scrambled to the prisoners and untied the ropes around their wrists. Furiously snatching away her paws, Pip tenderly rubbed her wrists where the ropes had burned the skin under her fur. Courtesy of Mr. Bernard Booth, ma'am, G.I. Joe said, unhooking the messenger canister from his ankle and passing it to the hedgehog. John has a long moustache. The hedgehog read aloud with a smile. This little mouse was right. Plan Violet and Operation Popeye can begin. Bring me a grape. She turned to the squirrel, who dashed away at once to burrow in the ground a few paces away. Included with the original scroll was another blank sheet of paper Pip had not seen. As the hedgehog laid it flat on the ground, the squirrel returned, handing her a wrinkled green bulb. Tearing the fruit open, Madame Fassade rubbed it against the paper, revealing hidden instructions and diagrams. Invisible ink, Hans whispered to Pip. It appears this rat and mouse kitten's arrival demanded radio silence, the hedgehog said after reading the words on paper. A fierce look of concentration passed over her face before she rolled it tightly closed again. Destroy it, she said firmly, handing it to the squirrel, who feverishly ripped it to shreds with his claws. The hedgehog looked Hans and Pip up and down. Bernard Booth believes if a Morse code message was intercepted, the enemy would never cease hunting an umbrella mouse. Hans and I are assigned to the mission with you, G.I. Joe cooed. You can trust him completely. His being German and a former Goliath rat has made him one of our strongest assets. You're telling me that Bernard Booth has one of the most feared Axis animal soldiers in his command? The hedgehog frowned. Noah's Ark muttered to one another nervously and scowled in Hans's direction. And he trusts him. It sounds cuckoo when you say it like that, G.I. Joe said, but I gotta tell you, I'd sacrifice every feather on my body for him. We've completed 10 missions together, and we're a force to be reckoned with. If anything goes wrong, he pretends to be the enemy, and it's saved my beak more than once. And what about this mouse kitten and the umbrella? Madame Fassade said, shaking her head in disbelief. Mon Dieu, whatever will these British agents think of next? Pip stood tall, trying to look as grown-up and capable as possible. Pip's an honorary member of Churchill's secret animal army, G.I. Joe said. Bernard Booth's ordered that the little lady and her umbrella stay in our care, and she's to help us while she's here. She and Hans will continue after Noah's Ark's completion of Operation Popeye. Bernard Booth is full of surprises today, the hedgehog said with a sigh. So, little one, you know that also means you and Hans are also honorary members of Noah's Ark. A rush of excitement pulsed under Pip's fur. Now she was a spy in Churchill's secret animal army. Getting to Italy would be easy, and fighting alongside Noah's Ark on the way didn't seem so bad. She wanted to help bring an end to the war that had killed Mama and Papa. Alors, we must organise our plans at once. But first, Madame Fossard said softly, looking at Pip and Hans in the eye, forgive us for your treatment. You must understand that enemy spies are everywhere, and we can never be too careful in these times of invasion. I hope we can be friends. She held out her paw. As G.I. Joe said, my name is Madame Fossard. I am the leader of this group. I'm Pip, Pip said, tentatively shaking paws. Pip Hamway. Hans shook the hedgehog's paw in silence. Welcome to the French resistance, Hans and Pip. We are pleased to have you with us. The cat yawned with disinterest, and the eagle scoffed in the corner with an angry ruffle of his feathers. Used to his temper, the hedgehog ignored him, and climbing onto a log before rows of ears pricked high upon feathered and furry heads, she addressed the hollow. Tonight is the night, Madame Fossard said, her voice increasing in volume, encouraging her troop like an army general sending soldiers into battle. I told you before France fell that Hitler is not unbeatable, nor is he eternal. We must continue to nibble away at the enemy. After the Allied success on D-Day, the enemy is retreating inland, but we have not won the war yet. Bernard Booth in Stronghold has intercepted a message from the enemy, and we're going to stop them. Stronghold? Pip whispered to Hans. It's Noah's Ark code name for London, little lady. G.I. Joe winked. Don't worry, you'll soon get the gist. This evening we shall conduct Operation Popeye, the hedgehog continued. The humans are moving weapons and laboratory equipment by train east to the Nukton Naval Camp in Ventoux Mountains. If we let them pass, they will travel to Germany, and from there they will gain strength. They will use the weapons in our Allied soldiers in France, Belgium and Italy. They will take the laboratory equipment to their concentration camps here in France, Germany and Poland. Innocent men, women and children will suffer, but we will not let them pass. The forest animals nodded with determination, and a proud smile drew across the hedgehog's face. When the moon is at its highest, the train will cross the Nouveau Bois Bridge over the river beside the monastery at Bec. We will chew through the supporting beams and force the train into the water. Whatever happens, the flame of the French resistance must not and will not die. Noah's Ark cheered. Madame Fossard paused, feeling stronger with every word. Emile, she said, pointing to the largest of 3 beavers sitting in the middle of the group, go to the Nouveau Bois Bridge with your wife and son now. Gnaw every timber column on the far side of the river into a point, but be careful not to chew all the way through. I will meet you there tonight when the monastery bell strikes 12, and together we will watch the train fall. Emile nodded and promptly scurried out of the hollow, with the other 2 beavers at his heels. Pip watched their large, waxy oval tails vanish through the forest's trembling ground firs, feeling a tremor of excitement beat inside her chest. But first, the hedgehog said, turning her prickled head to Pip and Hans with twinkling eyes, it's time our new members proved their worth. Okay, we'll stop there and save Operation Popeye for tomorrow. I will see you then. Have a great day.